We're here with an old friend of mine, Coach Jan van Breda Kolff, former SEC Player of the Year. As a player here at Vanderbilt in 1974, came back to his alma mater 20 years later as the men's basketball coach, and had 4 postseason trips in 6 years as the coach here. And then went on to Pepperdine, took that team to the NCAA tournament his first season, and then wrapped up his college coaching career at St. Bonaventure. Now living down in Florida with his wife, Betty. Jan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrew. Like you said, we've been friends for a long time when you go back to the 90s, and here we are in 2023. So that's 25 plus years.
That's right. I had hair back then. I was fresh out of school as an undergrad here at Vanderbilt, but, working as the SID for your basketball teams was a real highlight of my career, and really enjoyed getting to know you and the players, and traveling with the team, and being such a Vanderbilt fan, and getting to, be a part of the traveling party and everything. Trip to Hawaii, I remember quite well. So it was a lot of fun. But I want to ask you first about, I should congratulate you first. Your old team, the Denver Nuggets, won the NBA championship. Do you still consider yourself a follower of the Nuggets, and what were your thoughts on their victory?
Well, it's kind of funny because I played in Denver my rookie year. They were still in the ABA, and then 1 year later they came into the NBA along with the Nets and Indiana Pacers and San Antonio Spurs. But I love my year that I played there. We had a great team, and my wife and I just got married and just fresh out of Vanderbilt, and enjoyed making a lot of friends there. And, some of those friends are still today, but it was a great experience. But, I ended up playing with the Nets for 7 years. So that's kind of more of what I identify with, because I, spent more time with them. But I did love Denver, and I felt great for them. And the fans were unbelievable last night watching the game and seeing how excited they were to win that championship.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go back to those Vanderbilt days. Your SEC player in 1974, Vanderbilt wins the SEC championship that year. What was that experience, sort of achieving something that had only been done once in Vanderbilt history before? 1965 was the only other regular season champions. What made that team so special, and what do you remember most about that season?
I think that we had, 5 of us or 6 of us, I think, came in together in our freshman year. We weren't eligible to play varsity, but we grew together a lot as a team, and and bonded. And sophomore year, we had a good year. And junior year, we went 13-5, and Kentucky went 14-4, and we had beaten Kentucky both times. So if we had tied with them, we would have gone to the NCAA tournament. So we were awful close, and we were frustrated by that. So our senior year was like, we have to win it now. This is what it's all about. And I think everybody has goals. And I never once grew up saying I wanted to play in the NBA. My goal was always, I want to make it into the NCAA. That was my goal. And so our senior year, we were able to achieve it. But it was just a lot of close games. We were the cardiac kids, and we were fortunate enough to win that, and it was a great atmosphere.
Yeah, Memorial Gym back then was the place to be. Of course, your coach was Roy Skinner, who was the coach that recruited Perry Wallace, who I wrote my book about. And I got to interview Coach Skinner for that book and talk to so many of his former players. It seemed like he was pretty straightforward, no nonsense, man of few words, but he didn't coach much longer after that 74 team. But what was he like at that point in his career, and how did you guys react to his kind of his dry style of coaching?
Well, I think that there's a lot of coaches nowadays that either are control oriented or old school, where they get on you when you make mistakes, or the new wave is just let you play. So when I played for him, he gave us freedom. And back then you played 40 minutes. You could play the whole game without coming out, which was a great situation. Now, nobody plays 40 minutes, but, you didn't look over at the bench when you made a mistake or missed a shot. And he just gave us freedom. And I think that we all enjoyed that. and we really played well as a team. And I think we got along, coaches and players. But he was the perfect coach for me at that time.
Okay. And Perry said he was ideal coach for him during his playing days too. He didn't need a screamer given all the other stress he was under. But, in terms of coaching influences, obviously your father, Butch Van Breda Kolff, longtime NBA and college coach. You were an assistant at Princeton, and I know Pete Carril was an influence on you. But can you talk about those other influences on you in terms of the big name and, highly successful coaches that were a part of your life, even as a young man?
Well, I think that I played for Larry Brown my initial year with Denver, and then I played for him with the Nets towards the end of my career. And Larry was very innovative. He was, we won that year in Denver. We won 69 games, which was, the most wins until the Chicago Bulls won 70 plus. But, we pressed a little bit. We run and jump just like Carolina played, where he went to school and also coached under Dean Smith. But, the high altitude there, we pushed it, and it was a great atmosphere. And I enjoyed that. And then I think UB Brown was the one who I admired in so many ways, because everything was black and white. There was no gray in anything. If he said, you don't do this and, you're going to come out, or whatever the situation was, you knew what your situation was. And we had, players that automatically, regardless of the score or anything, would go in at a particular time. So with 6.5 minutes to go in the first quarter, there'd be a guard and a forward just go right in, regardless of what happened. And so you never felt like you were wondering if I'm going to get in the game or whatever. But UB was a great influence, and I really liked him. And I used some of those substitution patterns as I got into coaching later on.
When did you first think that you would like to become a coach? I guess, you had a father that was a coach, so it probably wasn't too far off your mind, but I think you were considered a coach on the floor when you were a player too. Is that correct? When did you think about making that transition?
Well, everybody said I was a coach on the floor because I had a good feel for the game and I had the ball in my hands as a point guard, but I didn't really, understand X's and O's and total strategy as a coach would. But one of the reasons I went to Vanderbilt was I wanted to go to an academic school, so that I didn't think when I came in as a freshman that I was going to play professional basketball. So I wanted to become a lawyer, and I wanted to go to a good academic school. And, so I was all looking to go in to become a lawyer when I graduated. And so I didn't really think of the basketball. Then, as it turned out, we were fortunate to have a good year. And because of our success as a team, I got, some attention and got to be drafted and go into the NBA. But when I finished, I wanted to do something different. So I worked at the bank for a year, my first year out of college, out of playing professionally. And, it was just a different atmosphere. It was kind of methodical. And, if you're in the commercial lending business, you have to make sure who you're going to give money to, because if it doesn't work out, that's not a good thing. So I liked it, but there was the path to move up the ladder was going to be a lot slower. And I helped out in Princeton as a volunteer. And the first game I went to, I was not minimally involved in it, but we won by 2 points. And it was like you felt the adrenaline, you felt that action. And that's kind of how I grew up, being in a competitive atmosphere and playing and coaching games. So I just immediately said, well, if this opportunity works out full time, then I'll go into it. And at the end of the year, Brian Winters went to Cleveland Cavaliers with Lenny Wilkins. The spot opened up at Princeton, and then that was it. But it wasn't what I thought I was going to do initially.
And that was when Coach Carril was the head coach there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And, you think about that Princeton offense and those back cuts and screens and everything. And so obviously they had a style of play. What was the culture like around that team? And was that even more important than the X's and O's, or like, what did you learn about just the way he ran that program?
Well, when I first got there, it was a totally different style than you played in the NBA. So it was kind of getting used to that. But I went out and recruited 2 players my first year that I thought were good players, that were good athletes, and they could do certain things that I thought would bring a different dimension to the team. And as it turns out, when you recruit at Princeton, they have to be able to dribble, pass, and shoot. Not just one, not two. You got to do all three.
Mm-hmm.
So my first year, I was kind of putting a square peg in a round hole. And then the next year I said, okay, we got to recruit the players that he's been coaching that type of style for 25 years. And then, I fell into recruiting the best player Princeton had at that time for a long time and was second leading scorer in the history of the school behind Bill Bradley, Kit Miller from Chicago. And he was just that perfect player that fit into the Princeton system. So it was an interesting thing. We kind of controlled the tempo of the game because nobody could make us play fast and we could make you play slow. And if Princeton got ahead of you, it was hard to catch up because we weren't going to shoot in the first 10 seconds off the first pass. So it was a very successful system. And then when I became a coach at Cornell, we had players that did not fit that system. And so I had to learn how to coach different types of players. And I had to learn pressing. And so I learned to press. And then we started pressing there and playing zone. And I enjoyed that aspect of the game.
Okay. And so you were at Cornell for 2 seasons
Right.
before you were hired back at Vanderbilt. And at that point, was coming to Vandy like the dream job that you wanted in college basketball?
Well, I think, you're playing in the SEC and following the SEC during the 4 years I played in. And afterwards, I kind of still followed it no matter where. So, going back to Vanderbilt where I had success as a player was exciting opportunity. I think at the time, only being a head coach for 2 years in the Ivy League was a big jump. So, the SEC had a lot of good players, good coaches, and, I had to catch up quick because, I didn't have experience recruiting, a Power 5 type of player. And, so that first year was an experience. And each year I think I got better and learned how to make the best of what you have. And that's kind of what a lot of coaches do when they move into a different situation. But it was probably, I might have been a year or two away from being totally ready for that job.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like in retrospect, a couple more years at Cornell, you think would have maybe served you better ultimately? But
or maybe going to a mid-major.
okay.
I think that, when you go from a low major to a high major, maybe being in a mid-major, would have been an opportunity to play against better players, coaches, and recruit better players as opposed to making a quantum leap.
Right. Okay. And so one thing I really wanted to talk to you about this last couple of times I have seen you when you've been back in Nashville is you've kind of hinted at, like you were kind of young then, you were relatively early in your coaching career. And I've gotten the sense that you feel like there's things now that you wish you knew then, not necessarily related to the X's and O's of coaching, but everything else that goes along with being a head coach and building a program and a culture and your interest in the players off the court. Is that fair to say that you've been thinking about that aspect of your career quite a bit?
Yeah, I think that when you play and coach, it's a 12-month job and you never get off that treadmill. And no matter what you're doing, you're always thinking about the next game or the next practice. So you don't really have a chance to sit back and reflect and think of what I should do here or there. I had 2 years at Pepperdine where I kind of implemented some of the philosophies that I learned from some other coaches, and I felt successful in those 2 years. But overall, when I look at my my coaching career, I feel like there was a lot of things that I missed out on, especially the relationships and connections and the team bonding type of things, and trying to make a difference in each person's life and trying to be in a situation that it's more than a game. I think life is not a game, but sports and basketball, they are a game, but they're finite. So when it's over, there's another opportunity, but life is infinite. So I kind of think if I had a better perspective then and understood, losses and failure is just a learning process instead of being a life and death. And I think a lot of coaches get caught up in that, that it's life and death and you lose, you got to be miserable and you can't relax until you win the next game. And I think that when you do that, there's, you're not going to be relaxed or efficient in what you do. So in my reflective days, I think I see the coaching so much differently. And I admire the coaches like Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt, who just not only teaches his players how to be better baseball, but how to be better people, and the life skills and the student athlete development that he, works with his players every day on. I think that's, something that's incredible. And I love the way he approaches that. And, I feel like I'm in that role right now where I can help them either in a college or high school atmosphere, where I could help coaches and players and kind of understand what maybe my mistakes were, my weaknesses are now my strengths. And I feel like that's my calling, and I look forward to that opportunity if and when it comes.
Yeah, I feel like people who identify those own personal weaknesses, and then they have the best credibility, when they talk about it to other people. I mean, like specifically at Vandy, when you think about, like, what do you think about that you could have talked to your guys in different settings more, or done more things off the court together, or just relationships? Is it conversations? What is it that was missing that you would have liked to implement if you had another chance?
Well, I think that, I came from Princeton for 5 years, and Coach Carell, who was, a mastermind in the strategies of basketball, we sat around every day, all day, and watched film. And then we would devise what the practice plan was. So, my experience was watch film, prepare your team so that we knew every out of bounds play that the team was going to run. We knew every play they were going to run. And then we tried to, do certain things in that game that we were more prepared than any other team, because I watched more film. But while I was watching those films, I was buried in the office. And so I didn't interact with the players as much. When I went to Pepperdine, I decided I'm going to do this different. I'm going to get up real early in the morning and watch film. And then so when I go into the office, my film work and my preparation was already done. And the office it was just like a sliding glass door. So when players walked by, they saw me sitting in there, and I could see them, and they came in, and it seemed like all day, all we did was deal with, team dynamics with the staff or talking to the players. And I was prepared because I did it in my off hours. And I think that would have been, had I, loved to have done that first. Coach Carell did, and it was more ignorance than anything else.
Yeah, I see. And you had 2 really successful years at Pepperdine with that approach, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we did some team bonding things that were just, to me, were very interesting because, we kind of learned a lot about each other, both players and coaches, and we kind of opened our hearts to each other. And it kind of reminded me of the year we had at Vanderbilt when I was a junior and senior. We really knew each other. We did everything. We went bowling together, played ping pong together, played cards, played flag football, and that was kind of the type of team we had. We did all sorts of things, but we really got to know each other. And I think we respected each other in a lot of ways. And that's why we won all those close games. I think teams that win close games are usually, really bond well, or they have a superior player that can make those plays at the end.
Right.
Like the Joker last with Denver Nuggets.
Right. Were those your most fun 2 years of coaching?
Oh, by far. It was, I wish that you could turn back the time and the clock and relive that type of personality and that type of atmosphere, at a Vanderbilt again. Obviously that wasn't going to happen, but those 2 years were great. And you got to know those players so much differently, and my wife got to know them, and she was like a mother to half them. And just being in that situation, and I tell the story every time. My first year there, we had a really good year. We went 25-9, and we got to the NCAA tournament along with Gonzaga. And we opened up with Indiana up in Buffalo, and we beat them by 20 something. And then we play Oklahoma State on a Sunday and that was Eddie Sutton, and they had 6 seniors, and they're really good. But we got down early, but we came all the way back with a minute to go. We had a chance to cut it to 1 and we missed. And we ended up losing by like, I think, 4 or 6 points. So I go in there and talk to the media afterwards. The players are sitting in there. They're going to take their showers, go out and see their parents, and then we'll go back to the hotel. Well, after about 45 minutes to an hour, I go back in the locker room, and every single player is still sitting on their stools with their uniforms on. And I've never seen that before. So I was like, what are you guys doing? I mean, it's like, aren't you hungry? Don't you want to go get some eat? We had a great year. I mean, we'll celebrate that. And they go, if we take our uniforms off, our season's over. And we don't want that to be. We don't want our season to be over. And I was like, wow. Now, if I had that type of situation my first year of coaching, I would have really had a lot more success. So maybe, it's too late for that, but I think I can help others maybe achieve those type of goals or attitudes and really, have an impact on kids that maybe, I missed somewhere along the line, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. And so just to be more specific about that, you're interested in what, like meeting with coaches at the high school or college level that might bring you in as a consultant, to talk about these types of issues that coaches might not ordinarily stop and start to think about, or how does it look, what you'd like to do? How do you envision it?
Well, I think that, on the middle school, high school level, I think there's a lot of, trying to get those players, parents, and coaches on the same page is a difficult situation. So if you want to form an equilateral triangle, all three have to have the same amount of input and same roles. Well, that's going to be impossible because everybody thinks they're the most important part of that equation. But I think if you partner with the parents, the coaches and the parents and the players, and they all understand that all boats will rise with the tide, and we're all going to be successful, and we're all going to, feel better about ourselves if we understand that we all, it's kind of an empowerment thing. You have to empower others to feel like they have participation, and I think that's kind of where I see that I could help do that. On the collegiate level, it's a little different because, the players are, the parents aren't involved in the college scene like they are in high school and middle school. It's kind of the coach and the players. And, sometimes, that works seamlessly and they have a good culture or they create a culture. And, I think I could help them on a collegiate side there. And I think I could do it on the high school side. I think I could help with fundraising and just, being a positive person that sees what can be accomplished, because sports is unbelievably great when it works. But when it doesn't work, everybody wants to stop it immediately when, parents are walking out in the court or players are doing crazy things off the court. So, but I think when you look at the pandemic and when we came out of that, everybody was selling out, whether it's baseball, football, or basketball. Everybody's selling out, and they all were missed that. So it's a great thing for the community to be part of a team, either as a fan or a player or a coach. And I'd like to see that, go get better instead of worse. And I think we're on a little bit of a downward spiral there, but hopefully we can turn it around.
Yeah. In terms of the downward spiral, I mean, starting even at the youth level, I don't know how much time you spend around like just youth sports. I know you're a basketball guy, but my son's playing baseball and he's on a team that, I respect, but you see so much when, in my opinion, kids specializing in one sport too young, parents living their lives vicariously through their kids, overemphasis on winning at too early of an age as opposed to just developing as a player. What do you see at the youth level? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree?
Oh, I agree totally. I mean, I've written a lot of chapters on different aspects of the game, whether it's the mental side of the game, student athlete development with life skills, coaching, intangibles, faith-based parables to life application. But everything I've written and researched keeps coming back to this age of specialization, where you look at Tiger Woods and you look at the Serena and Venus Williams. those are generational players. There isn't going to be another Tiger Woods maybe for 50 years or the Williams sisters. But when people see that, they say, well, gee, if I get a coach and I start working on my golf game or my tennis game, and I do that every day, 7 days a week, and till I get an opportunity to become a professional in that thing, that's going to be really, really difficult. And what mostly happens is like a baseball pitcher that starts too young. There's overuse of your muscles. You start to have that muscle fatigue, then you start having emotional exhaustion, and then you have physical stress, and all of it because the goal is too high. I think, I was fortunate enough to play soccer, baseball, and basketball, and I played all three of them until I got to high school, and I was just soccer and basketball. But you learn from other sports, you learn from other coaches, you learn from other teammates. But that specialization, I think, if you look at a lot of coaches, say you shouldn't specialize. And but I've seen other kids that just love one sport and that's all they want to do, and it sometimes works. But I think if I had my druthers, I would say, try to be a little bit more well-rounded.
It's just real briefly. I didn't know until recently that your grandfather was like a famous soccer player in the Netherlands, a member of the Dutch national team, played the World Cup. Is that all true?
Yeah, I mean, I never knew that really. My father, came over from the Holland. My grandfather was a soccer player, and I knew that. But he came over to New York, and he was an investment banker and did very well in that field. And when I knew him, he was older, and I was just a little kid, so I never did that. But somebody did some research and then found out that he was the youngest Dutch player ever to score a goal in a World Cup game. I think he was like 17 years old. And my father was a much better soccer player than basketball. He was All-American at Princeton. And I was a better soccer player than I was basketball. But we moved out to California as a sophomore. They didn't have soccer at my school. So I was eventually really depressed over not playing soccer, but it probably helped me in the long run because I had more basketball, and soccer wasn't a sport you go into professionally at that time.
Wow, I didn't know that.
But that's good research by you.
So when it comes to student athletes who have these days, it seems like as many or more pressures on them as ever before, trying to make it as an athlete, as a student, worrying about their name, image, and likeness, and their branding. And it seems like a lot of it they compete against each other, or they may not develop fully as a person outside of their athletic ability. Is that something you're interested in talking to athletes about, how they take advantage of this moment in their life and, think more long-term? What's your message to student athletes?
Well, I think that, when I we was but we got $15 every month for laundry. And I remember going over to Kirkland Tower and getting my $15 for my laundry, which was the only money I got all year. And I felt like I won the lottery. That was like $15 back in the early 70s was a lot of money to me. Now it's ridiculous. It's, it doesn't even two gallons of gas or something. But I think that, to be able to be in a situation where you put things in perspective, that I'm here as a student athlete, my education is important, my athletics is important, and my improvement in both areas is important. And the opportunities to play professionally are less than 2%. But, there's a lot of ways that you can, use and leverage your athletic ability to become very successful in life for 40 years. And I think that a lot of companies like athletes because they're competitive, disciplined. They know how to work long hours. They know how to deal with adversity and failure. So I think that trying to keep them focused, that those are your first two priorities, and then the social life and all that will, can come on the side. But I think that, some of the internet they have now and all these things that are going on, I feel like, you're trying to figure out how you can play to all parties in the situation. And I think it's very stressful and very difficult. And a lot of people have some, mental health issues because of the pressure and stress.
Did you ever deal with mental health issues during your playing career, your coaching career, and what have you found later in life that's helped you sort of put things in perspective?
I really didn't have. I was kind of singular focus, and so as a player, I didn't really have any of those issues. And when I coached, you were always worried about the next game. So you never had that moment where you could really reflect or see what everything was about. But then finally, when I did finish playing, did finish coaching, and did all those camps and clinics for younger kids, and we moved to Florida, I had a moment of reflection. Then I realized, the areas that I didn't do very well in. And I think that, the worst time you can have as a person is a conversation with yourself when things don't go well. And I think that as I've gone and been out of coaching and had time to reflect and read the Bible and be part of a Bible study group and learn about having a conversation with God. And now all of a sudden he listens unconditionally, and all of a sudden you can take away your stress or the things that bother you and talk to somebody else and I think that helps. And I think that, some people do that at a very early age and have had, very much success, both athletically and academically and professionally, because they have, a good spiritual foundation.
Terrific. Hey, I just wanted to tell you that I found something on my desk the other day. And you talked about the team building activities that you did at Pepperdine and maybe not as much at Vanderbilt. But I don't know if you remember this. So you used to have a softball game.
It's a softball?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember distinctly.
And this is a
I
picture.
love playing that softball. We did that everywhere.
Yeah, it was a lot
I
of
remember
fun.
playing left field. Oh, it is. I think that when you get people outside of what their comfort zone is and you do that, I think it's really good. We did that at Pepperdine, and I remember New Orleans Hornets, we were struggling one time, and all of a sudden it was time for practice. And instead of practicing, we played volleyball. And it was
Really?
like seeing all these guys in volleyball was like nobody knew what they were doing. We had Baron Davis, who went to UCLA and was a California kid, and all of a sudden he gets up, to serve, and he goes back, and just like the pros do, he jumps up and spikes her. Everybody's like, where'd this guy come from? But, doing something like that makes guys laugh and fooling around. And when somebody does something bad, you can laugh at it and have a good time. So I think anytime you can do something that isn't in that environment where you're on the court and you've experienced some stressful moments or a losing thing, I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah. Well, it seems like we often forget that sports is supposed to be fun too. And a lot of what you've referred to today kind of gets back to that, right? It's not life and death, even if it feels like it is sometimes.
I think that I've read all sorts of studies. They say by age 13, 70% of all kids that play sports quit. And the overriding factor, they say, is it's not fun. Sometimes it's too competitive, and maybe I don't play with my friends. And another part of it that I've heard is a factor when they quit. They said, is that ride home after the game with their parents. And I think that, it's a very difficult situation, because as a parent, you want the best for your child. And if you think that they're better than they are being treated, or you want them to be, understand the nuances of the game, and you might have played it. So you want to give them what you know to be true. And there's always that expression, truth with love works, but it comes out of a situation of trying to help it. A lot of kids go the opposite way, and they just think it's so. I think that's one of the things that we have to understand. They're still kids, especially when they're 12, 13, and they may become a really good athlete in a different sport at some time, but they may just crumble at those times. And I think it's not the parent being bad. It's just I want the best for them, and sometimes it backfires.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those rides home when I was a youth baseball player, and I know my parents loved me, but I didn't like those rides home, 'cause I was just
Oh, I
going
know.
over and over of only thinking about things I could have done better in the games, and I just didn't want to hear about it at that point. Now my son is 10, playing baseball. I try very hard not to put any pressure on him, but like you say, there's certain things like you just want to impart to him, but finding the right time to say it and the right way to say it is very delicate balance.
But at least you had the experience of being on the other end, so it helps give you perspective and how to handle him in the right way. So I think that's you're a good model that way.
I hope so. I hope so. Well, Coach, it's been great catching up with you. If people would like to reconnect with you, old friends from your from Nashville or from Vandy days, or you're a coach out there somewhere in the country that's interested in what you're saying, what's the best way for people to find you?
Probably email me at jan1102 at comcast.net. So that would be the best thing to do.
All right, Jan1102 at
Jan is my
Comcast.net.
name. Yeah, and we lived at 1102 at our first place in Tennessee. So they gave me that thing, Comcast did, and I've had it since.
All right. Well, at least it's not your social security number or something. So,
No, no.
well, it's great to see you. Congratulations on everything. Thanks again for being an influence on my life when I was 24 to 28 years old, and best to your entire family.
Okay, thank you, and best to yours, and let your son just enjoy the game right now, and take him for ice cream after a game sometimes, and not just replay the game. That's the way you got to do it.
That's right. Will do. Have a chance to practice that this coming weekend. All right, Coach. Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you, Andrew, very much. I appreciate it. Bye bye.